Good morning. Welcome to the Morristown Unitarian Universalist Fellowship. It's a mouthful, but we're here together and online. Welcome. I'm Susie Harris, and today we have Reverend Charles Loflin worshiping with us today, so we welcome you. Together here, we weave together the covenant of the fabric of our community from the strands of our separate lives. We are an inclusive, welcoming community, congregation. Whoever you are, wherever you are on life's journey, you are welcome here. We adhere to the principles of the Unitarian Universalist, which can be found on the card on the back of your seat here in the sanctuary. Please feel free to take a card. And please feel free to silence any phones or devices that you may have so we can worship together. I have a couple announcements there on the back of the order of service as well. Following today's service, there will be an in-person meeting of the MUUF Buddhist Sangha in the meeting room. Reverend Alan Wells will lead a belated Waisak celebration. It's the celebration of the Buddha's enlightenment, and all are welcome. So Alan's back here, so see him after the service. On Thursday afternoons at 4 o'clock, there's a bocce game here on the front of the oval, weather permitting. So drop by, play bocce, and all are welcome. You can talk to Toby Tyler if you want more information or some tips on bocce. On next Sunday, the Odyssey Project will present the Odyssey of John Franklin at 11:30. Also next Sunday, there'll be an afternoon of games at 3 p.m. And looking ahead in August, there's going to be a marshmallow roast for the young people, the young adults. That will be from 7 to 9 on Saturday, August 5th. So in the spirit of hospitality, I invite you to greet someone you did not come with.
I must say that is a beautiful energy in the room. How good it is to be together. Is that not always the case? It is a pleasure for me to be back here with you this morning leading services. I look back on my time here as your intern minister in the middle of COVID, and somehow we got through it all together. What a beautiful time that was. I want to share some opening words with you this morning. These come from Walter Royal Jones, Jr. Mindful of truth ever exceeding our knowledge, and community ever exceeding our practice, reverently we covenant together, beginning with ourselves as we are, to share the strength of integrity and the heritage of the Spirit in the unending quest for wisdom and love.
Love is the spirit of this fellowship, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to one another. Join me in singing hymn 6. It's up on the board, and rise as you are able.
May
this morning. Have you ever been absolutely sure, I mean 100% absolutely sure that you were right about something? If you've ever been right about something, raise your hand. Oh my gosh, I think all the hands are up. There's some people who've been absolutely right about something. Now, I have another question for you. How many of you at some point found out that the thing you were absolutely certain about was wrong? How can that be? What a complicated world we live in when we can be so sure that we're right, but to end up being so sure that we're wrong. This was a real struggle for me growing up as a child. I kind of thought that moment when you learned how to read was going to be a magical moment, because I figured at that point nobody could lie to me anymore, right? Because I didn't have to rely on somebody else telling me what the truth was. I'd be able to read it. I'd be able to find the facts, and then I would know, and that would be right. And then I discovered that people lie all the time in things they write about, i.e. Facebook. You know, it's a really hard struggle for us, but it's part of our development as human beings, coming to terms with truth that we think, but that experience then teaches us to rethink. That's part of the journey. It's part of what makes our advancement as a species possible, because we have the ability to analyze and ask ourselves if it's true. If it's true. There's a little piece of advice that I just want to leave with you as this story for all ages. Some ways to make sure that the thing you're looking at is perhaps actually true. There's an acronym called FIRST that you can use when you're trying to evaluate the truth. The first one, the F in FIRST, stands for funding. If you come across a statement somewhere, especially in the realm of science, one of the first things to ask is, where did the funding come from, right? You may not be surprised to know this. There was this study that came out that said that if you ate Concord grape juice, or drank Concord grape juice, that you would get much smarter. You'd be able to remember things. You'd be able to drive better than you did before. And they were absolutely convinced this was what their scientific study shows. Guess who funded that? Well, I won't say the name other than to say the largest fruit juice producing company was the one behind that study. So FIRST is one of those acronyms that's really, really important to begin with. And the first one there is, of course, funding. The I in FIRST stands for, and it's slipping my mind at the moment. I've drawn a blank. It will come back to me, and I will share the greater list with you. But I wanted you to start with the funding, right? Because what we're really getting to there is a reason people may have a vested interest for you to believe something. That's a good question to ask in all aspects of our life, whether it's in the realm of politics, the realm of faith, or even in the realm of how we deal with each other in our families. Who benefits from me believing something to be true? And do I have the courage to find the truth for myself? Blessed be. So this morning, for our milestones and passages, I only have, I see another one coming, which is great. Thank you, Steve. So this This milestone says that Tom McGinnis is now back at the Muse following a time in the hospital and rehab. So I did not know that Tom was in the hospital, but I am glad to hear that it sounds like things are improving for him. I also have one other milestone that I was made aware of. Arlene Shapiro is in the hospital again. She hurt her neck last week, and she's been at Morristown Medical Center. She did not expect to be there more than a week and may be home by now, but would welcome cards and phone calls. And there are undoubtedly unspoken concerns, milestones, and passages for all of us. We hold those in this space as well, because even though they are unspoken, they are still a part of us and still a part of our gathering together. I invite you to join me now in a spirit of meditation or prayer or contemplation, whatever your heart calls you to do in this moment. Just acknowledge that you are here in a space of community. And as always, we begin with our breath. The breathing is how we know we're alive. Make yourself as comfortable as you can in your chair, and I invite you to take a deep breath in and then let that easily fall out. Once more together, a deep breath in and release, and a third and final time, a deep breath in and a release. Be present. Be present in the now. Not what has been, not what is yet to come, but in this moment, in this special moment that we have been gifted. And as we gather in community, I share this prayer for humility, written by Alex Jensen. Spirit of life, I find you in these humble places, the quiet, still places where I am held in a love greater than myself. You are the wind in my breath, the fire in my soul, the subtle heartbeat of creation all around me. Love is unimposing, yet firm and steadfast. It is present to all those who would know peace. It challenges me in my arrogance, and it moves me to listen deeply when I fail, and I always do, to see the fuller picture. Spirit of love, spirit of life, you find the gentle words to speak life into me and hold me when all else around me and in me feels broken. You remind me that I am loved and, dare I say, saved just as I am. It is a salvation found in living life loved. Remind me always of who I am, O holy mystery, by whatever name I call you. Help me to see in you the small, everyday moments where you are found. Grant me the wisdom to listen for you and seek you in those unlikely and unexpected places. And make me that spirit of love for others. Amen. Our hymn is number 396, I Know This Rose Will Open, and the lyrics will be on the screen.
It's time for a round. On this nice, sticky, humid day, it'll be good for you to breathe in a lot while you sing. Okay, we'll sing it twice in unison, and then you'll be number one and you'll be number two. I know this rose will open. I know my fear will burn away. I know my soul will unfurl its wings. I know this rose will open. I know this rose will open. I know my fear will burn away. I know my soul will unfurl its wings. I know this rose will open. I know this rose will open. I know my fears will burn away. I know my soul will unfurl its wings. I know this rose will open. I know this rose will open. I know my fears will burn away. I know my soul will unfurl its wings. I know this rose will open. I know this rose will open.
Well, that was lovely. I would like to share a reading with you this morning. This is one of my favorite pieces of all time. This is from The Demon-Haunted World by Carl Sagan. This was actually the very last book that he published, and it was co-authored with his wife of many, many years. This is what Carl Sagan has to say. Every time a scientific paper presents a bit of data, it's accompanied by an error bar, a quiet but insistent reminder that no knowledge is complete or perfect. It's a calibration of how much we trust what we think we know. If the error bars are small, the accuracy of our empirical knowledge is high. And if the error bars are large, then so is the uncertainty of our knowledge. Except in pure mathematics, nothing is known for certain, although much is certainly false. Moreover, scientists are usually careful to characterize the veridical status of their attempts to understand the world, ranging from conjectures and hypotheses, which are highly tentative, all the way up to laws of nature, which are repeatedly and systematically confirmed through many interrogations of how the world works. But even the laws of nature are not absolutely certain. There may be new circumstances never before examined inside black holes, say, or within the electron, or close to the speed of light, where even our vaunted laws of nature break down. And however valid they may be in ordinary circumstances, they need correction. Humans may crave absolute certainty. They may aspire to it. They may pretend, as partisans of certain religions do, to have attained it. But the history of science, by far the most successful claim of knowledge accessible to humans, teaches that the most we can hope for is successive improvement in our understanding, learning from our mistakes, an asymptotic approach to the universe, but with the proviso that absolute certainty will always elude us. We will always be mired in error. The most each generation can hope for is to reduce the error bars a little and to add to the body of data to which error bars apply. Because the error bar is a pervasive, visible self-assessment of the reality of our knowledge. You can often see error bars in public opinion polls, an uncertainty of plus or minus 3%, say. Imagine a society in which every speech in the congressional record, every television commercial, every sermon had an accompanying error bar or its equivalents.
The Morristown Fellowship supports the work of the congregation within our walls and outside our walls. Today, we will split our offering 50-50 with UU Faith Action New Jersey. UU Faith Action New Jersey coordinates grassroots social justice advocacy with our member congregations and individual UUs and allies across the state of New Jersey. You can donate via text to give. So you type in the number 73256 with the keyword MUUF followed by the dollar amount. Or you can give online, muuf.org/give. Thank you for your generosity.
Again, just lovely. Thank you. And thank you for sharing your offering today with UU Faith Action New Jersey. In case you don't know, I happen to be the executive director for UU Faith Action New Jersey. UU Faith Action New Jersey does social justice work, legislative advocacy in the state, especially in Trenton, where we're pushing for changes, real changes, across a number of issues, including environmental justice, reproductive justice, immigration justice, reparations, gun violence prevention, and other things. And it is the generosity of our congregations, our UU congregations, that makes that work possible. So we are so very, very grateful for your generosity. So I have two big questions for you this morning. Here's the first one. What is it that you know for certain? It's a big question. Here's the second. How can you know it is absolutely true? That may be the even bigger question. You know, in essence, these are two questions that are part of epistemology. Now, epistemology is a big word that simply means the study of knowledge. According to the Internet Encyclopedia of Philosophy, and despite the name, that is an actual peer-reviewed resource, epistemology can be broadly sorted into two categories. The first has to do with the nature of knowledge. I mean, what does it mean to say that someone knows something or fails to know something? This is a matter of understanding what knowledge is and how to distinguish between cases in which someone knows something and cases in which someone does not know something. And while there is general agreement about some aspects of that issue, as you might imagine, it is more difficult to answer than we might at first realize. But the second category of epistemological concern is the extent of human knowledge. It asks the question, how much do we know? And in fact, how much can we know? How can we use our reason and our senses and the testimony of others and other resources to acquire knowledge? Are there limits to what we can know? For instance, are some things simply unknowable? And is it possible that we do not know nearly as much as we think we do? Should we be concerned, and this is the big question for me, should we be concerned about a skepticism that would assert that we do not or cannot know anything at all? So let's have a little fun this morning, shall we? I'm going to make a statement, and we're going to see if we have consensus in the room about whether the statement I'm about to say is true or false. So we'll take a simple, quick vote. We'll show by a show of hands if the statement is true or false. Here's the first statement. The Great Wall of China is the only human-made object easily visible from space. If you think that's true, please raise your hand. A handful of people. Who thinks that's false? Some skeptics in the room, huh? The answer is there are a lot of human objects visible from space, and the Great Wall of China is not one of them. Who knew, right? Some of you knew. Here's the second statement. Human blood, when it's inside the body, is actually blue, and it only appears to be red when it's exposed to oxygen. If you think that is true, please raise your hand. Okay. If you think that is false, please raise your hand. So not real consensus on that one, more of a 50-50 in the room. Here's the answer. Deoxygenated blood is dark red, and oxygenated blood is light red. Blood only appears blue because we're looking at it through skin and fat, which makes it look that way. Who knew? Third statement. Human beings have 5 senses, and those are sight, smell, taste, touch, and hearing. True? Anyone think that's false? Okay. The answer is humans can also sense balance, acceleration, pain, temperature, and a host of other things. So depending on how you actually count them, there are between 9 to over 20 senses. Okay, last question. I promise this is an easy one. The earth revolves around the sun. How many of you think that's true? Oh my gosh, we're close to consensus. Is there anyone who thinks that's not true? You think that's not true? I think it revolves around his actions. Oh. This is a guy you may want to trust with your future. So here's what the science actually says. The science says that the Earth actually revolves around the solar system's center of mass. And while it's true that most of the time the mass of the solar system is contained within the mass of the sun, it's not always true. So there are times when we are revolving around empty space. Now, we could go on and on and on. Some of you have recently become experts in epistemology, and you might be observing that each of these carefully chosen examples that I have presented to you this morning come from belief in statements that most people believe to be true because we have been told over and over and over again that they are true. Most of us have not actually had reason in our professional life or in our curiosity to actually do the research to determine if those things were true. So part of our brain goes, oh, but if I were really looking into it, I'm sure I'd be able to figure it out. Sure you could. One way of reconciling this idea that things that seemed so true, that seemed that they were inevitably true, is that there is a cycle of truth. And we can appeal to the idea that this cycle is a progressive perfection of knowledge. You know, the idea is that we begin to believe something, but we continually test it, and over time, as our understanding around things change, we perfect our knowledge. There's some danger in that line of thinking, though. The idea that everything is ever upwards on a path to progression, that things will always get better, and our politics simply say that isn't true. Fascism is always on our doorstep. And in a democracy such as ours, we are one election away from a potential nightmare. You know, in today's reading from Carl Sagan's The Demon-Haunted World, Science as a Candle in the Dark, we heard these words: humans may crave absolute certainty, they may aspire to it, they may pretend, as partisans of certain religions do, to have attained it, but the history of science, by far the most successful claim to knowledge accessible to humans, teaches that the most we can hope for is successive improvement in our understanding, learning from our mistakes, but with the proviso that absolute certainty will always elude us. So science says that's really the best we got. It says, honestly, when we get to the bottom of everything, you don't know anything absolutely for certain. Everything's relative, everything's contextual. But do you remember that skepticism I talked about that the epistemologists are concerned over? The skepticism that there is danger or potential danger if we conclude that we cannot know anything for certain. There is danger if we think that some things cannot be known. Sagan suggests that except in pure mathematics, so he carves out this example, pure mathematics, nothing can be known for certain. Well, that's an interesting phrase. Pure mathematics? What is that? Well, basically, it's the idea that you could study mathematical concepts completely disconnected from any application of the math. And if you were doing that, then theoretically you could be dealing with something that was absolutely true. But what kind of absolute truth is that? If it doesn't have an application to anything else, it seems to me like an empty sort of knowledge for its own sake. And I don't believe in the absolute certainty of math even. Let's look a little more critically at that, shall we? Go ahead, take a moment, figure it out. I'm going to wait. I seriously, I want you to figure out the math problem. I want you to have an answer. So take a moment to get to the answer to this problem. You have an answer? Okay, what answer do you have? So the 16 I'm hearing 2, and I'm hearing 1. What's going on? Well, a lot of you are going to say that it's 16. A lot of you are going to say that it's 1. And one person saying that it's 2. But here's what you're really thinking. Okay, bear with me just a little bit, all right? First off, I want to talk to those people who think that the answer is 1. If you're a 1 on this, raise your hand. Now look around, see who's in your camp, right? These are your people. These are the people who think it's a 1. If you think it's a 1, this is what your rationale sort of looks like. So you know that you're supposed to start with the parentheses, right? So 2 plus 2 is 4, and if you multiply the 2 times the 4, then you get 8. And 8 divided by 8 equals 1, right? So how many of you who said 1 are convinced you're right? All right, but some of you said 16. So what's your thought process? Well, your thought process goes like this. You also start with 2 plus 2, and you say that's 4, but you're saying now the parentheses are gone. And now 8 divided by 2 times 4 is what we're left with. And you say 8 divided by 2 is 4, and 4 times 4 is 16. Who said 16? Are you convinced?
There are no brackets.
You're absolutely sure. So we've got some division in this room. Some of you are convinced, you know for certain the answer is 1. And some of you know for certain the answer is 16. So what is the correct answer? Well, if we had been solving this problem 100 years ago, the correct answer would have been 1. 100 years ago, I said. The correct answer today is 16. Right? You're going, what? What happened? This pure math that we're talking about seems to have changed over the last 100 of years. What the heck is going on here? The difference lies in 2 different historical understandings of what's called the order of operations in mathematics, right? It's not about the math, actually. It's about the rules under which you interpret the notation of the math. So the children in the room most likely can tell us, if they've been through much math class, you know that the rule is PEMDAS. This is what they teach in school now. The way to figure this out is PEMDAS. PEMDAS is an acronym. What does PEMDAS stand for? This is the order at which we process things in mathematical notation. We figure out the parentheses first. We all had that right, so give yourself a pat on the back. You started in a good place. Then there are exponents. Well, there are no exponents in this problem, so it doesn't help you whatsoever. But if there were exponents, we would have to deal with those next. But here's where things fall down, and this is where there's a difference in understanding. Multiplication and division are the same thing. They're at the same order. So they are performed in order in the equation from left to right. 100 years ago, we were taught that multiplication happened before the division, right? But this is actually modern mathematical notation. And then the last step is addition and subtraction, which also are equal. They are the same kind of operation, so they are performed in order from left to right. And if we follow that, then 2 plus 2 is 4. Then we're left with 8 times 2 times 2. So we perform the division first because it's listed first. 8 divided by 2 is 4, and the 4 times 4 is 16. So if you said 16, you are technically correct today. And all of you who just said 1, you're classics. That's it. You just embrace it. But what we're really talking about here is mathematical notation, how we write these math problems. And this didn't just happen overnight. This was developed over a really, really long period of time. It was introduced by Francois Viette at the end of the 16th century, and it was largely expanded upon during the 17th and 18th centuries by the likes of René Descartes, Isaac Newton, Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz, and most overall by Leonard Euler. I want you to remember some of those names because I'm going to come back to them, particularly Descartes, Newton, and Leibniz. But this mathematical notation, why does it exist? Why do we need it at all? Well, mathematical notation is a way of trying to be consistent, because that's really, really important for science. The repeatability of information becomes super, super important. And in essence, across all of these scientific fields, mathematical notation becomes really important because what is it going for? It's going for concise, unambiguous, and accurate. But some of you are still thinking, okay, why are we talking about this? And I know most of you don't even use the word church. It's a fellowship. It's just funnier if I put church on the slide. But there is a reason behind my madness here, right? It does matter. It matters because of this idea of representing things in a concise, unambiguous, and accurate way. So, like magic, this brings us back to where we started, an epistemological question. How do you know what's true? How can you be certain that it's true? And keep in mind that this mathematics developed over hundreds of years. It was devised and refined. But the people who were doing this work, remember some of those names I was pointing out? Descartes, Newton, Leibniz. One of the things that's most interesting to me about these names is they were multidisciplinary folk. They weren't purely mathematicians. They were lawyers and philosophers and scientists and physicists and astronomers and theologians. What we're talking about is the Enlightenment, and all of these things are connected because it was not seen as separate, discrete silos of work. They were working to answer the same questions that everybody is asking, because the theologian wants to know what is true and how do you know it's true just as much as the scientist. In our modern sensibilities, we think of these things as discrete, separate categories, unrelated domains. And there are some good reasons for that. I'm not taking that away. The emergence of the sciences has undoubtedly led to some specialization that has resulted in amazing advances in our knowledge and in our lives. But this is what I want to come back to. I cannot help but see at the heart of the matter, when this was going on in the Enlightenment, that there was more interdependence than independence. How many of you have heard the phrase from philosophy, I think, therefore I am? You know who said that? Descartes. Same guy working on mathematical notation. Maybe not the founder of it, but very interested in scientific notation, because Descartes was interested in what do we know for certain and how can we know it is absolutely true. Now, the pure scientists in the room may say, wait a minute, I still think Carl Sagan is right. I still think perhaps in science There is no absolute certainty, perhaps not even in the theoretical concept of pure mathematics. Sagan said we will always be mired in error. The most each generation can hope for is to reduce the error bars a little. Maybe Sagan has it right. Or does he? Sagan's a huge influence on me. He's one of my mentors. He's one of the people I look to, partly because he was a scientist who wrote in a time when science was dismissive of so many other ways of thinking. And yet Sagan was not like that. He did not dismiss spirituality. He actually embraced it. Here's one of the things Sagan said. Science is not only compatible with spirituality, it is a profound source of spirituality. When we recognize our place in an immensity of light years, then that soaring of light years and in the passage of ages, when we grasp the intricacy, beauty, and subtlety of life, then that soaring feeling, that sense of elation and humility combined is surely spiritual. So are our emotions in the presence of great art or music or literature or acts of exemplary selfless courage such as those of Mahatma Gandhi or Martin Luther King Jr. The notion that science and spirituality are somehow mutually exclusive does a disservice to both. Now, while he did not use the term himself, I would today classify Carl Sagan as something of a religious naturalist. Religious naturalism is part of my core faith and my own belief system. Religious naturalism accepts that we live in a world, a natural world, that is full of awe and beauty and mystery, and that is something to be celebrated. And you see, what it gets at for me is that there's more than one way of knowing. Science is a wonderful, wonderful thing, but it is not the only way of knowing the truth. What do you know? And how can you know that it's absolutely true? Returning to those epistemologists, there are some philosophers called rationalists who believe that all knowledge is ultimately grounded upon reason and reason alone. Empiricists, on the other hand, they believe that all knowledge is grounded upon experience and ultimately experience alone. And for me, I reject those two binaries because most binary thinking gets us into a whole lot of trouble. I need a both-and world. I need a world where both the rational and the experiential is valued. I need a world where I can know something even if I can't prove it using the tenets of science. I can't know something that science proves is false. That's a whole other sermon. But I can know things that science can't put its finger on directly. I will concede that in the scientific realm, there are rules and standards and notations that we have to follow in order for it to do its work. But I am willing to accept that other ways of knowing can have their own rules and standards and ways of doing their work, and they don't have to be mutually exclusive, and, this is the big one, they are not inherently one superior to the other. We have been caught in a senseless argument for far too long that there is a best way of knowing things, a right way of knowing things, and if only everybody agreed with us, the world would be so much better. What do you know for certain? And how do you know it's absolutely true? You are no doubt aware that we Unitarian Universalists recently had a General Assembly in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, right? The annual gathering where we all come together to do some work, some important work. And this year there was some big work being done. You probably heard a little bit about this. A major question was about how or if we were going to move forward with the proposed revisions to Article 2 in our UUA bylaws. If you don't know about this, Article 2 is the section of our bylaws where it lists our Unitarian Universalist principles as well as the sources. It's sort of been the bedrock of how we've described ourselves for years and years and years. It's also been dangerously close to a creed at times. So why is this important? Well, this year we took a vote at the General Assembly because there has been work done by a committee in order to propose changes to that Article 2 bylaws. So we took a big important vote this year. Did we vote to approve the bylaws? That was not the vote. We don't do anything simple, right? The vote this year was whether to continue in the process for another year so that at the next General Assembly, we will vote on actually whether to adopt these specific recommendations. But we did pass that vote. So we're going to be voting next year on these changes. If you haven't seen this, I hope that you will be seeing a lot of it really, really soon. In addition to the changes in the text of the Article 2 bylaws, there is now a graphic that's going to accompany the bylaws if we approve these changes. And this is the graphic that helps to explain what the changes are about. I want you to think of this as a kind of notation. In the same way that mathematical notation is not math, but a way of dealing with math, this image is not who we are, but it's a way of helping explain who we are in a way that is concise, unambiguous, and accurate. So what does the graphic say? Well, the graphic says, in essence, what do we know? And how do we know it's true? The clear, unmistakable answer is what we know is in the center of the graph. What we know is love. That's our collective answer. That is a profound statement of Unitarian Universalist theology, something that has often been missing in the way we talk about our principles and our sources. It is the suggestion that our collective answer to what we know for certain is that love is the theological and practical and real center of it all, that it is at the heart of everything. Yes, we aspire to these other things, interdependence and equity and transformation and pluralism and generosity and justice. We want all of those things, but we can't have any of those things if we don't put love in the center. This is a love that will not let us down, that will not let us go, and God willing, it will not let us off the hook. This is radical love. This is revolutionary love. This is redeeming love. It is a bold answer of how do we know the questions for certain. And let's be absolutely clear, this love is important. It is not a feel-good slogan. It is not a codependent and vapid emotion where we're going to play nice with each other but not hold anybody accountable ever. It is not a self-effacing respectability that's willing to bend the knee to power every time power says it must. This is love. This is radical. This is love that says, I will bring my best self, and I will expect you to bring your best self. It's love that is revolutionary. Now, I know if you grew up like I did, coming from certain Christian evangelical traditions, that this has been preached in Christian churches for a really, really long time. It's supposedly been the center of so much of the thought process, but there was a difference in what was preached and what was practiced. And why this is potentially a groundbreaking, fundamental shift for us as a movement is if we have the courage to accept this, to live into love at the center, it can change the world. And how do I know that? How do you know that? I would suggest you know it because of places like this. You know it because of the community you've experienced. You know it because when you were hurting here, you found love. You know it because when you were here and you saw someone else hurting and you loved them, you know what that felt like. Liberal religion has not answered the question of what it knows and what it knows for certain. And if we don't get busy about answering that question, we will not exist. This is a pretty strong answer. Why? Because of love. Could we create that kind of world? Well, for those English majors who are here today, you probably have felt a little left out by all the math discussion. So I wanted to throw you a bone before we walked away. I want you to consider the comma. I mean, think about it. The comma is kind of like another notation, is it not? It's not the thing, but it's a way of better understanding the thing. So what does this kind of notation do for us? Well, you might get an image like this. If you can't see this, the sentence here in blue says, Jane enjoys cooking her family and her dog. No commas. We really need to use commas to save at least one life. Because the comma, like the mathematical notation, like the proposed image that we're talking about in our bylaws, is about how to get concise, unambiguous, and accurate. May that indeed be the case for every single one of us. Our closing hymn this morning is going to be number 1075. And Beth, you have a few things to...
10:15.
I'm sorry, 1015. I read the wrong one.
If you're looking in the hymnal, the words up here have been updated. So if you hear other people singing, don't worry about it.
Friends, our closing benediction this morning are lyrics from the song We Shall Be Known by Carisha Longacre of Memuse. We shall be known by the company we keep, by the ones who circle round to tend these fires. We shall be known by the ones who sow and reap the seeds of change, alive from deep within the earth. It is time now. It is time now that we thrive. It is time we lead ourselves into the well. It is time now. And what a time to be alive. In this great turning, we shall learn to lead in love. Oh, may it be so. In this great turning, we shall learn to lead in love. Blessed be, and amen.